Welcome back to Slot.it's Garage. Here we have the next great build. This is the motorized Ferris wheel from Magnetic Racing. Now this is going to take a while. It's rather big. There's two big packages, lots of wood, lots of stuff to take out and prime, and then there's the motorized parts as well. There's motors and shafts and all kinds of things. So first step is going to be start priming all this stuff. Then once we get that done, we'll start the build. Right, so I've got everything primed. Some of it hasn't been punched out yet, and I still have some edging to do on the multitude of pieces. There's hundreds of pieces for this thing. But the first thing we're going to do is start with the base here. This is actually two pieces that I've already glued together. And this will be the little walkway where you get up and get into the Ferris wheel. So these pieces are all primed and edged. Made sure I've painted the edges on the pieces that will show. I've left most things white except for the walking platforms, but we're going to get all that mounted in here. I'm going to dry fit it first just to make sure everything's where it's supposed to be, and then we'll get it glued up and we'll get a picture of that once all that's glued. Here we have the completed base. I did the walkway area with that tan. These railings are very soft. You have to be very careful with them. Even over here, you can see I had a little mistake and I crushed that, broke it while I was seating it into the holes, but I was able to kind of glue it and piece it back together, and I will touch that up with paint at the end. These little things at the end here, this is for hanging signs from, but the base is all done. And the next step will be doing the frame for the Ferris wheel itself, the outside structure. So we'll move on to that next. Now that we have the base done, the next part is doing the side structures, the two pieces that hold up the Ferris wheel. So we've got quite a bunch of these to do. This is one set. And these get layered on top of each other. So it'll be 3 of these layered together to create the structure and add the strength. And over here, these are the little motor mounts where the wheels are that will move the Ferris wheel. So we have to layer these together, glue them all up, and they have to be pretty well perfectly aligned. So I'm going to use some slow set glue and clamp them just to make sure everything is perfectly aligned. So we'll get back to that with pictures as this gets done. Here it is, all glued and layered up. I use this version of Loctite, the gel. This, you got about 2 minutes to reposition stuff around, so that allowed me to make sure everything was lined up well, especially the motor mounts, the bottom, and the top where things will sit in here. So we have this all layered up. I'm going to do the other side, and then we'll move on to the next phase. Now that we have the main side structures built, we have to add the support structures for those, which is quite a bunch. So we will go and ahead and get that all together. And then we should have the main uprights finished. And here we are then with the side supports all glued up. This is the main superstructure to support the Ferris wheel. There's tabs here that help align that along the base. You're basically making like I-beams. And then tabs where it goes into the base. And then on this side, you have your motor mount. There's a motor mount for each side, and there will be rubber traction tires on the motor on wheels that you'll create that will turn the Ferris wheel. And then here we have an integrated guide for your cabling. And I'll come back and touch up all the exposed edges that need some white. But we're progressing along nicely. Back at the bench, we finished the main supports for the Ferris wheel. That's adding these little cosmetic pieces to cover joints and whatnot, make it look like support plates. There's some on the inside as well. I've gone back with paint to touch up the edges and where the primer wasn't thick enough, but that's all been cleaned up. So both of those are done. Now I'm starting on the actual wheel itself. Two of these cogs get glued together for each side. Then this framework gets pressed into the cog, and these parts and those little parts there will all get glued in to create the frame, and I'll just work my way around. I have not glued these on. I want to be able to make sure everything's perfect, and there is a retainer wheel that goes around and will clip onto these little nubs and lock everything in. So there's no reason to glue that while this is all getting done to make sure everything gets set up just right. And I'm going to take my time and slowly work around and put all that together. And then we'll be back. Okay, we've made some progress. Let's first look at the inner rings. These are done with 3 different rings, 2 sections per ring. So that's 6 pieces to make 1 ring. There's this really thin outer cover. You can see it's 3 thick. There's the broad centerpiece and then another notched piece on the inside. These notches is to support the end pieces here. So they have been done. I'll set that one off to the side. As you can see, I put all that together now. We did have one little minor issue. Let me see if I can find where it was. We'll see. Where is it? It was the last final piece to go on. Here we go. As you can see, as you start, you put one in at a time and go around, and as you do that, you add these inner pieces, and they lock everything together. And then when you get to the last section, if everything is just right, it should be okay. Well, I guess it wasn't just right. I got it as just right as I could get it. This piece went in just fine. And I thought, oh, it's going to be just easy. Nope. Could not get the last piece. It was just too wide. So I had to do some cutting and organizing to get that piece in there. I'll fill up these little gaps with some putty and paint at the end. But all in all, it was finished. And as you can see, this is that locking ring I mentioned. It locks around the spokes. As you can see, we'll try and do it on the other side as soon as I find it. It just goes like that, and you get it over the spokes. It's hard to do when I'm looking through a camera. But well, I don't want to do it with just one hand, but that goes down and locks it in. And then there is a trim ring, which I'll flip it over and show. So I haven't glued that down yet. This is just for show for now. But then you have this other little trim ring that comes in. And that's not right. I think there's a smaller one too that I have to get that will cover that. Maybe a different one I have to put out. But there's a trim ring for that. And then these spokes at the end pop in. I'll flip this over how I was installing it. But all those go in. You press them down. Make sure they all lock in properly. They go all the way in. And then that all gets glued up. And when all of those are done, the whole wheel assembly is complete. And I will go ahead and finish it off, and then we'll have a final look at that. Back to the video to have a look. Everything's been put together, so the whole wheel is all nice and done. I did, even though I was trying to be super careful, I did crack a few of these while I was putting them into their notches. It's just got a little careless, even though you're trying to be really safe. Sometimes things go wrong, but the damage wasn't significant, so it's all stable. Of course, you want to try and make sure these get lined up over top of each other. But other than that, it went in pretty nicely. The only thing left for the wheel now is to build the carts, of which there are 14. There's little, these are the spindles for the carts. I'm going to stick these into some foam, paint like half, let it dry, flip it around, stick it into the foam, paint the other half. That's kind of like the easiest way to paint these kind of objects. But they'll go into these little holes here. As soon as I can find it to where it's, there's a hole there on each side. Those will get glued in, and the carts will rotate on that. So all that is nicely done. And it is quite large. I'm impressed with the size of this whole thing. When we come back, I will have all the parts laid out so you can see what it's going to take to make one cart, which is quite a bit. So we'll be back with that. So let's talk now about the cart building, which is basically the most intricate part of this whole thing. There's 14 of these carts to be built. Sadly, it doesn't divide up nicely evenly. You can go 7 of one color and 7 of another. You can't go 3, 3, 3, 3 or anything like that. So I may end up going with 7 colors, 2 of each. We'll see. It's a lot of different color changes, but we have a lot of different parts here. So this is basically the foundation of the cart, of the seating area. That will be painted to a different color. We had other parts that came in a bag that weren't pop-outs. This is the roof base. This is for setting up that. This is for connecting it to the carts to the bar, trim piece. doors. These are the cart number pieces, and then the sidewalls of the cart, and then all the roof panels for all the carts is laid out in there. So I'm basically all this stuff has to be primed yet. And there's one reason why I don't pop out a lot of these things and I paint them to begin with while they're still attached. They get blown around. Just the force from a spray can blow these things all over the place. You have to watch the angle and the distance and just be careful because you don't want these things flying all over and getting stuck to other things. So it's easier to just do the most painting while they're still connected. But these came in a plastic bag, so I will have to lay them out in a box and do that painting and decide how I want to do the color schemes and then start putting it all together. But yeah, for sure, this is the seating area, so I might get like a gray or a brown. The doors, I may leave the doors white, I'm not sure, and then just paint all the side pieces, and then paint the roof pieces to match for each cart. So we'll sort that out, and then we will get back to it. I wanted to stop at this point. I've already done all the priming and painting, well, at least the priming for all the parts for the carts, but I wanted to stop and show while that was all drying, I mounted the wheel itself to the frame, just to give you an idea how big this thing is. Here's my hand. I've got the motors mounted. I've already tested them. They're 4.5 volts, so I have a little power pack here where I can adjust the voltage. But I wanted to make sure that I had them wired up right to run in the same direction and see how well it ran. Ran fine. There's a little bit of it moves a little bit as it's rotating and loses a little contact down with the wheels. From the side, it looks perfect. But from this direction, it'll lose a little contact. They do include shims and guides to attach to help that. So I'm going to wait till I get all the carts done and mounted, and then recheck the running of it and make whatever adjustments are necessary. And as I said just earlier in the video, that there's 14 carts, and I want to make an even number of colors, so we're going to go with 7 colors. And instead of using spray paint, I'm going to use my airbrush and all the paints I use for like Warhammer miniatures. And then when I get all that set up and ready to show, we will be back with that. Now we're getting down to it. I punched out the roof tiles and separated anything for carts. There's 8 roof tiles, a door, a number panel, and 6 side panels for each cart. And there's 14 of them. And as you can see here, there's plenty of leftover panels that I'll probably test some of these airbrush colors on. I went through all my paints, and just for simplicity's sake, I went with the stuff that's already airbrush ready, so I don't have to do any diluting or mixing. Went with 7 colors. I'll do 2 carts in each color: red, green, orange, yellow, purple, blue, and pink. The only question I'm going to decide, is it going to be a solid for the entire cart, or am I going to alternate and leave white, then a colored panel, then a white, and then same thing with the roof? I'm debating. I don't know. If I do colors on these, you might lose the ability to easily see it. Same with the doors. I'm going to do some tests, like I said, on some of the panels and see how these colors look. But I'm going to probably just mull it over for a day or two as to whether I want solid colors on the whole thing, or if I want to alternate the panels between colored and white. So once I think about that and mull it over, then we'll get to painting. Back to the table after all that painting. I've got all the cart pieces painted. Share a few tips after this. This does not go as smoothly as I had hoped. While using the airbrush paints, when I was testing, and it's always good to test your paints on a part of the cutout boards that still have primer on them, just to check for things like this. So you can see how that paint is pooling. Usually the primered surface is too smooth and the paint isn't able to adhere to it well, so the surface tension in the paint causes it to pool rather than spread out onto the surface. You can see some more views of that. Interestingly enough, the rattle can paints did not have that issue. It was only the model paints that I was using for the airbrush. I only had, as you can see, I had blue, red, green, and yellow in rattle cans. So those went on fine. For the other colors, the purple, orange, pink, I had to basically sand those down till there was hardly any of the primer left, just so it was kind of sealed, but the primer look itself was gone. And then the airbrush paints were able to go down decently enough. I'm still kind of stunned at that. I've not had that issue before, but I haven't really used rattle can primer that much. Usually when I'm painting miniatures, I'm using the more expensive Citadel primers and stuff that are meant for miniatures, and I don't have problems with airbrush paints at all with that. But is what it is. I wasn't going to spend $20 a can for whatever 7 cans of primer I used for this whole project. So yeah, it took a little bit with that, with the sanding to get all that down, but all the colors are done. And like I said, it's always a good idea to test your paints on scrap before you mess with your main pieces so you don't make a giant mess. Another thing to show that might help people in the future with doing these kinds of miniatures or buildings. I mentioned this before, that one reason I like to paint while they're on the spars is because it keeps stuff from blowing around. Even with rattle cans, you still get pressure off the surface that can blow parts all over the place. While they're on the spars, they're not going anywhere. But if you start taking little pieces like this, and even with light airbrush pressure, you'll get some air underneath, and this stuff will go flipping and flying everywhere. So what you can do is take some frog tape, double it over, and lay it down on a piece of cardboard, and then put your pieces on that. And this holds it down real well. They don't blow all over the place. And if you're doing multiple colors per sides, like one color on one side, different color on the other, this will help. Since this is that paint frog tape, as long as you stick it down well, it usually prevents any kind of paint bleed underneath. So this is a really good way to keep your pieces stable and clean while you're painting. So now that this is all done, it's time to start assembling these 14 carts. So I will basically present that in picture format as I go. So here we go. And there it is, all operational. Took a while to paint all that stuff, but I like the color scheme the way it is. It breaks up the monotonous white of the entire structure. We'll go in and look at some details. These were the little caps printed. Those can come off. They're not glued in. And I used some grease in the channel to facilitate the easier rotation. We have some signs added. They go all the way around it. As for the motors, just using physics to make this a little easier, rotating it clockwise rather than the motors trying to run the whole thing up from this end. You have gravity helping with the rotation. I've run it both directions, but this of course gives it the easiest workings. I've put all the little fences around it. What is that? Yeah. Gone in and touched up some of the paint work. Now there, as you can see, these little holes here and there. There's some studs that come out to put on different side pieces like this or that to cover up the main gearing, and you can make different signs for it. I've left that off for now as I plan to use my 3D printer. I'm going to do like a black casing, then some transparent white filament to make up whatever name I decide for the park and the racetrack, and I'll put LEDs in that to illuminate it, and then I'll just run the cord down the back side of this and then down out here with power cables for one of the motors. So no big deal. I don't need to do that now, but that's what I'll do to finish it. But we have this entire thing working now. This was quite the build. A lot of parts. Maybe 1,000, I don't know. It was a lot of, I mean, there's maybe 30 parts in each, 30 or 40 parts in each of the carts. So a long build, a lot to build. I've still got a lot more magnetic racing stuff to build yet. I just love their products. They look so good when they're done. And I can't wait to get some more finished. But here we are. And we're done with the Ferris wheel. Yeah, thanks for watching, everybody.